You're listening to the Missionary Perspective Podcast with veteran missionaries Eric Johnson and Joshua Mead. We're glad you could join us. We trust this podcast will be both a blessing and a challenge as we relate topics in world evangelism from a missionary perspective. Now, here's Josh and Eric.
Welcome to the Missionary Perspective Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Johnson, and I have the great privilege and honor today to be joined by one of my good buddies and one of my favorite missionaries in the whole wide world, Adam Fridenstine. Adam and Esther Fridenstine have been church planting missionaries in El Salvador, El Salvador, for many, many years. Adam is also very involved in the Christian school they have there, their Bible Seminary, and many other ministries in which we will speak of today. One of those ministries include being one of the faces of a newly formed mission board for national pastors in Central America being sent all around the world. Adam, welcome to the Missionary Perspective Podcast. It's our pleasure to have you and to have you join us today. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, my privilege to be here. I enjoy listening to this podcast frequently.
Well, I'm so glad we've been able to work it out. In fact, Adam and I had the privilege just a few weeks ago to see each other face to face. I hadn't seen Adam in many years. And it's always great to catch up with friends. And so it was great to see you and your wife out there at Lancaster, to be encouraged in the word. And boy, missionary, sometimes we have great friendships from afar, but we never get to see each other. But it's also always so great to get together and catch up.
That's right. Yeah, we have some prayer cards. We've been praying for missionaries since deputation. So we have prayer cards where these missionary friends have their little kids. Those kids are now married and in college, out of college and stuff. So we tell the kids, they don't look like this anymore, but it's fun to be able to actually meet in person again.
Oh, I remember the first time we met your family about 7 years ago, and it was just such a thrill to get to know you. You came and visited us the next year, and just over the years, just like you guys, praying for you guys, and it's hard to imagine how quickly the time passes. Now, one of the neat things about where Adam is in El Salvador, Coatepec is a very specific name of a city that, because I often go back to the D.C. area where my home church is, there are many El Salvadoranians. And it's just like the greatest icebreaker to say, hey, have you ever heard of Coatepec? And they're like, yeah, how do you know about that city? I'm like, well, I got a friend there. It always is a great way to open the door to give the gospel by having a friend who lives in El Salvador. So I don't know if I ever told you that, but that's one of my favorite things when I'm out there talking to other people from El Salvador.
It's great. It's a small city, really, but it's well known because of it's just a very central location, and we're known for the beautiful views and our special sausages. That's what we're known for.
Oh, all right. Well, Adam, we would like the listeners to get to know you a little bit. So why don't you take a little time, tell us a little bit about who you are, how you became a believer in Jesus Christ, and then after that, how the Lord called you specifically to be a missionary where you are in El Salvador today.
Yeah. I grew up in Ohio, in southeastern Ohio. I was blessed to grow up in a good Bible preaching church my whole life, and was in essentially that same church my whole childhood until I left for Bible college, and the same pastor is still there today. I was always involved with church activities. My parents were always very active church members. They have never been in full-time ministry, but they've always been full-time Christians, my parents, and so we were raised that way. And so there was a parsonage that was being built on the church property, and so my dad was a carpenter, and so that's what we did for 4 nights a week for 6 months. So we went over there and worked from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. and tried to help move forward some of this process as volunteers, and so that was just life for us. So I didn't think that was odd. And then one day, preacher says, "Hey, can you guys come help mow the grass at church?" And so my brother and I have a twin brother, and the two of us, we kind of did stuff together. So we showed up to mow the grass. It was like 8 acres of grass and a lawnmower that barely worked. And so we show up to mow grass, and my pastor, Pastor Jay Hubbard, he said, "Hey, where's your 3x5 cards?" I'm like, never used those to mow grass before. We're like 15 years old. And he's like, well, you're never going to have a meeting with me without a 3x5 card, and you're going to write down what we're going to do today. And we're like, oh, we're having a meeting with you? So he very early started investing in both of us and just helping us with ministry and helping us have a heart. And so The goal was to mow the grass, but the lawnmower is broken. So the first thing on the list was fix the lawnmower. Well, sure, every 13-year-old knows how to do that, and it wasn't like, but the lawnmower was at least 3 times as old as we were. It wasn't that easy to fix. So all those things just kind of led into, we just enjoyed serving. And we started working around the church about 20 or 30 hours a week. And every time we showed up, we'd have a meeting with the pastor, and he'd give us things to do, and he'd ask us things about what we learned about Bible reading. I did not realize it at the time. He was mentoring us, and he was helping us grow. And boy, we loved it. And so both of us are now in full-time ministry. When I was 16, we had been at this for a while now, just kind of volunteering at the church. It was an interesting year. My parents actually were going to be missionary to the Caribbean. And Turks and Caicos, and they were going to go work in kind of a Christian school situation. And it was a great fit for them. And I did not want to go. And I said, you guys have fun. I'm not going. I've got my little yard mowing business. I had my own thing. I had my cows. We lived in the country. And, you guys go have fun. I really only had one friend, and we weren't even that close. I mean, besides my family. But at that moment in life, I had kind of, made some decisions, separated from some people who weren't going the same direction. And so I wasn't really that tied in with friends. We were homeschooled, and so I had already kind of decided, I just want to serve the Lord, and these guys aren't doing that. And so some great people, but we just weren't that close. And so at that time in life, I didn't really have a lot of things holding me back. I had cows and lawnmowers. I mean, that was like my thing. And so but I did not want to go.
Typical teenage boys,
Typical teenager, And so my parents are going to the Caribbean. They were going to live in like half a kilometer off of the beach. You could see the ocean from the house. They already had a house, that was going to be set up. It's like some of the best scuba diving in the world and stuff. And I'm not going.
I don't want to go.
You know what I was thinking, And so I said, I'm not going. And so we started selling stuff. We started collecting stuff for the school. I was serious. And then the door closed. Well, here's what happened. I surrendered and said, okay, it'll be great. And I started to get excited about going to be a missionary, as a missionary kid. And it would be a little different. We weren't going to be church planning. We were working with an existing ministry. It was a great situation, really. And then the door closed, and we never went. And I was like, what happened? And so my parents were, discouraged about that. And the rest of my family was kind of like, whatever. And I was kind of like, why did we go through all of that? And I didn't realize God was using that to prepare my heart. And honestly, I didn't connect that until many years later. I was already here before I connected that was God working on me just to be willing to go. And then later in that same year, maybe 6 months later, we were having our missions conference, and the preacher from Mexico was preaching about being willing to go anywhere. And he started mentioning several countries. And then instead of mentioning a specific country, him from Mexico, he mentioned Spanish-speaking people. And kept going. I didn't hear the rest of the message. I just got stuck with that and go to Spanish-speaking people. And I told my pastor, I said, man, I want to do that. I want to go to Spanish-speaking people. And he said, well, pray about it for 3 weeks and let me know. And he said, I won't ask you about it again. Just come back to me if you really still feel that. Well, I just wanted to see if it was emotion or if it was God.
Sure.
Boy, I couldn't wait for those 3 weeks to be up. I wanted to tell him about it. And I go back and I said, it's been 3 weeks today. He's like, since what? I said, since God called me to mission. I was so excited. And so it's just been a burning thing. I thought that was Mexico because I didn't, where else do they speak Spanish, right?
Exactly.
I had a limited vocabulary, limited geography at 16, but I tried to go to Mexico several times on mission trips. I could never go. It just never worked out. And I think that was the Lord kind of helping to keep me in the direction for what later became El Salvador. Another missions conference years later at Young Bible College. Somebody else's presentation about going to El Salvador. And I said, this is it. I know this is the place. And so it was interesting. I was not expecting to come work in a Christian school and these kinds of things, but somehow God knew about all that.
No. Well, that's an amazing story. And of course, you were mentioning Bible college. You went to West Coast Baptist Bible College, and I know that you were well trained there. and something else special happened there. And I know you are like me in the sense that both of us would not be where we are without our wives. Both of
Right.
us lean on our wives for much support in the ministry. Both our wives are very active in the ministry. So why don't you share us a little bit about your wife, Esther, and your kids and how they contribute to the daily work and mission there in El Salvador?
Yeah, well, I totally agree. We both married way over our heads, and that's a great situation. I
Amen.
would not want to marry, under my level for sure. Uh, uh, and so I actually met Esther as soon as we pulled onto campus. My
Oh.
parents, my twin brother and I were both going. My parents took us, and then our younger sister was with my parents and with us. At that, I have two other older brothers who are already out of the house, and they weren't with us at that moment. So my parents, and then my twin brother, myself, and my younger sister, we pull onto campus a couple of days early. And my parents were actually going to stay in California. My mom was going to go to a doctor for a while. And so we were just kind of there a little early. We pulled onto campus. There wasn't a lot going on. We had never been there before, didn't know anybody there. We had a connection that my pastor in Ohio knew Brother Furso, who was out at Lancaster. But I mean, like, we were totally cold turkey. We had no idea. We pull onto this property. I'm from rural Ohio, and this property's, first of all, Ohio's got a lot of hills where we were at and trees. And we pull out onto this property. It's totally flat in the middle of the desert, and there's these huge buildings everywhere. And I'm like, what have we done? And as we were getting out of the car, Esther pulls onto campus, coming back from a Walmart run, helping some of the other girls get ready. So she dropped them off and came around and said, "Hey, you guys look new. You want a tour?" She had been there for a year already. And she had traveled on tour group, and so she had this idea that you just help people and be nice and stuff. So I was immediately impressed with her, but obviously felt I had no chance, to be able to find somebody so wonderful. A couple years later, we started dating, and courting. There's a wonderful love story that God has continued to work. We've been married now for 16 years. So Esther is very good with administration, with details. We just got out of a meeting right now with Esther and two other staff members getting ready for the missions conference later this week. And she helps in basically every single area, and it changes. This year, she took on teaching math in our high school, which is 7th through 11th grade. And that's a lot. And so she does that. She helps a lot of the music ministry. She's our piano player. And so she helps kind of preview a lot of the stuff. I'll check all the sound and song schedules, and I'll check all the songs, but she's trying to filter them first. So I don't have as many to check. Like, no, that's not the right style, and all these kind of things. And then, so we work on a lot of that together. Of course, we host a lot of people, which is fun. We're planning to host a family in our house tonight and talk to them about baptism and the whole family. They've all been coming and been saved. And so she's involved in all of those details. And it really, you can't just limit it. It's like anything I'm in, she's in there with me. So we basically hang out at church all day. So we have, the way our school schedule is, our boys are in, 4th, 6th, and 9th grade. And so that means in the morning, Micah and Isai go to school in the morning, and Joel goes to school in the afternoon. So we have this other time. So in the morning, Joel helps here around the church property. Right now, as I speak, he's translating downstairs in a wheelchair outreach where we're helping people meet their physical needs. And we're partnering up with somebody else. They got all these wheelchairs together, and they're helping with the therapy and get these custom-made wheelchairs for these other people. And Joel's translating in that group and helping along the way. He'll do that all morning, and then he'll go to class tired and like zombie with his brain, because he's just been translating. So he's just all in. So then he's 15. Micah's 14, and he's in 6th grade. He has Down syndrome. He's just a bundle of joy. And he yesterday, after he got out of class, so yesterday afternoon, he went down, and all these people he's never really met before, but he just finds immediately these grandpas that are helping build these wheelchairs, and he's giving them hugs and stealing their tools. He's just having a great time. And then Isaiah is 10, and he says, "Hey, I can translate." And he goes down and he's helping translate as well. And so they're just every day, just kind of whatever's going on, they're all in. So later this afternoon, we'll be loading up the truck with Bibles and New Testaments for a police outreach. And that's one of their jobs. They'll go and they'll load up the truck. So they take these 50-pound boxes and they load them up, and they just think that's normal. They think all kids do that. And boy, we love it. We love it. And so we're all in this together, because it's not just God's calling on my life that affects the whole family, but the whole family is in on this.
Yeah. Well, it's really a great pleasure to know your family. In fact, I had a college student call me the other day. A lot of times we'll get these calls, I'm sure you do, or write you and ask you different questions, or interviewing a missionary. Anyway, I know this kid, so I'm talking to him a little bit, and I know he's had a lot of interactions with other missionary families. And I said, who have been some of the missionary families you've gotten to know that you really like? And he mentioned two families, and the second family was yours. And he talked about your boys and the interaction they had, and he specifically was talking about Micah and his compassion and his love. And we've seen that firsthand, and I just think that's great. That's a great testimony. I think there's nothing better in the world. Our kids are very close to the same ages. There's nothing better in the world to have them alongside, just enjoying in the fruit of the ministry and seeing people saved, and then literally being integral parts in it. And whatever the Lord does for their hearts, I know that in your case, I think one of your boys is feeling called to missions. One of ours is kind of feeling the same way. And so we don't push in that direction, but we're also excited that their experience with the ministry hasn't soured them, but has given them more of a fervor and desire for that.
Yeah, we love it. And we talk about, what would we do if we're in a ministry? And somebody asked me that the other day, and I said, cry. I don't know what else I would do.
Exactly.
This is the best life.
Yeah, I agree. Well, speaking of that, you mentioned a few of the ministries, and we don't have to take a long time, but why don't you talk about some of the ministries, because you're mentioning a wheelchair ministry or an opportunity to reach out. I know specifically in the last couple of years, you've been reaching out to the the police officers in the community. What are some other than church planting ministries like the Christian school that you've been able to be a part of in your number of years there?
Yeah, well, the four main ministries here are of course, the church, and that was started by somebody else, and he was here for a short time, and then there was about a year between him and then I came to continue on in that work, which has been wonderful. It was a baby church, but it's just been a wonderful experience. And then the Christian school, which has been here over 60 years. So obviously, I didn't start it. It had gone through a administration transition. And it was definitely overdue for another transition. And so things were not in a great situation there. And the Lord just used that to help us to see hundreds of kids saved and their families come to church, some of those. And it's been phenomenal. And a lot of our current staff members were kids in our Christian school when we got here. So that's really fun. So the guy who's going to be directing the music, and he was in this meeting for the missions conference I mentioned. He was in second grade when we got here, and he was just one of those kids that every teacher knew, because he was outspoken and annoying. Now he's leading our music ministry, and so there's a lot of that, and so that's awesome. We then have the 4-year Bible college, which is in Spanish. It's in person and also online, and so we've been able to reach into other countries that are Spanish speaking as well. So that's been a lot of fun. And then the international, or the Latin America Mission Board. So that's the more recent one. We started that officially in 2020 during quarantine. And so those are the four main ministries. With those, we take any outreach we can get. And so we go into public schools and preach, which have full liberty to do that. Which is frequently. We go into neighborhoods, and we'll have like a group setting where everybody just comes out right there, and then we'll try to have the second part of that outreach at our church, and so I try to get them to come in, and those always go really well. We have the police opportunity where we're giving a Bible and the plan of salvation to every police officer in the country, which is about 57,000. So that's been going for 3 months. Tomorrow I'll be going to do that, and so Lord's opened the door, and so I go into each department and I we'll meet with all of the jefes, the bosses of each police station. There's lots of them. There's, hundreds of those in our country. They have them kind of separated out, lots of small groups, and all the leaders of those groups will come in. I'll preach to them. I'll preach the gospel, and then present to them these Bibles and also the plan that we want to come in. These local pastors we've also invited to the same meeting, and we want to go into ministry week by week, and so that's been super fun. Lord just opened up the door last week. I had a meeting with armed forces leaders, and they want me to do the same thing with armed forces. So that's about 35,000, and those they literally just line up and in formation, groups of 100, 500, 1,000. We haven't started that yet, but that's how it's going to be, and we preach the gospel with full formation. So that's a super cool opportunity, which is 90% approved right now, and which has a little paperwork, some other preparation to present that to the highest military official who will approve that, who's right under the president. And so stuff like that, it's neat to see the Lord working. So like every other missionary in the whole world, we say we need more laborers.
Yeah. Well, it's also a very exciting time to be in El Salvador. You don't have the time today, but if you just take time, listeners, to research how the Lord has used the president really and some of the leaders there to really change completely the dynamics of that country, from one of the highest homicide rates to the lowest. And if you listen to some of his interviews, you will see, it sounds like it is because he is a strong believer in the Lord and has followed principles and been very tough. And so those men, that Adam's ministering to, these policemen and these people in the military that he's going to minister, these guys are on the front line of some of the most amazing things happening in a cultural change. And at the core of that is people's belief in Jesus Christ.
Yeah. We all
that's
need
pretty exciting.
It's awesome when a government realizes that too.
Exactly. And it's amazing how quickly things can change when you follow the Lord and his principles.
That's
well,
right.
With that transition in mind, you spoke a little bit, and we're going to kind of narrow down a little more on this neat, amazing new endeavor. I believe it was a few years ago you were getting ready to send out a church member from your church to another foreign country. And it seems like in that process that some things started going on in your mind of a greater need. And as you mentioned, in 2020 or during the pandemic, you started a new Latin American mission board specifically for national pastors, I think right now in Central America, but with the desire to see them go across the world. Why don't you give us the history behind that and kind of walk us through where it is today?
Yeah. So going back to what you mentioned about sitting out, I think every biblical church should be preparing to start another biblical church. I think that's everywhere in the whole world. And so that premise is really important. Though I am a church planner, I don't think I should be the only church planner. I think that should be 100%. Our church should be, somebody put it this way, every church should be pregnant. And when I heard that, I said, that's great. That we should be preparing to give life to a new church. Churches are churches. And so that premise affects us. And so we had Walter and Myra Menjivar. They were our first couple that we discipled. That was my first wedding. They were a bunch of firsts. And I just sent a picture the other day, popped up on my phone of when I baptized Myra in 2012, and she literally knew nothing about the Bible. She had been saved, and that was about it at an evangelist meeting, and just kind of looking for answers. Walter had a little more background, but they were just a long way from where they are now, and we went into discipleship, and they helped us with our Spanish, and we helped them with the Bible, and it was an instant friendship. We're all about the same age. Our kids all grew up together, and so they got married, and I offered him a job the next week to come help on maintenance and stuff. And that turned into being an assistant pastor. And then he was teaching classes and leading music and just doing a phenomenal job. He went on with me on several mission trips. And then I let him use our car to go on a couple more. And he comes back from one mission trip, which he took right before the pandemic closed down. And then during the close down, he calls me on a FaceTime call and says, "Hey, we need to talk." I said, uh-oh. He's like, I think the Lord's calling us to be church planners somewhere, and I think the Lord wants us to be missionaries to this Buaco, Nicaragua.
Mm.
Oh man, double emotion there. This nobody prepares you for this part. It's all
Oh,
exciting.
I know it. I know
Yeah, you do
it.
know. It sounds exciting to send somebody out from your own church. And then you're
Yeah.
like, but wait, we missed them. We love them. And who's going to do what they've been doing? But, that's the Lord works all that out. But so they're in Buaco. So preparing for this whole thing of we're teaching about being a missionary. We're teaching about going out. We're teaching about being willing to go to the whole world. But there's literally not a mission board to work with. And there's just not one. To my knowledge, there's not another Baptist mission board in this whole part of the world. Mexico has a couple of them, but those are for Mexicans. And so for anyone south of Mexico, I think there's some things in South America, but I haven't been able to get much information about them. There's just not much. So we started a Latin America mission board. So it's bigger than just Central America. And it's because it's really complicated to go to multi-country deputation, which is what you end up doing in these small countries. And it's difficult to get your funds in the right spot. And so because it's difficult, I don't know what came across my mind. Let's just do it for the missionary, and we'll help them. But that means like a lot of work on the mission board side, but it's been phenomenal. And we have currently 9 missionaries and church planners that are through Abi missions. And so the idea is that folks can raise support wherever, and they have the accountability of a mission board. They have training that comes with mission board and church planning, and then they have the support as well. There's always some medical emergencies. There's always maybe things that happen in their sending church, or pastor turnover, different things. And a lot of times when there's no mission board to help with some of that, the missionary kind of gets stuck in limbo. And mission board kind of helps bridge that gap of communication between the churches and the missionary. And it's a beautiful thing. And it's helping the local churches to help the missionary. And so that's what mission boards do. And we have some great options for that in the United States and in different places. But those are for U.S. citizens. So the mission board that we're with VIMI, they helped me to know how to structure the mission board here. And it's been a learning experience, but it's been beautiful to see that coming together. And so we have missionaries that are being supported by churches that they've never even been to. So because the connections with the mission board, there's pastors that are supporting from Colombia, supporting from States, and heard from some churches in Australia. And they said, hey, we want to support missionaries in your part of the world. Is there a way to do that? Yes, there is. And so they're not even expecting the missionary to show up there because it's just not possible. But they realize there's an open door right now. And there's laborers here where other places are like, well, we don't have a missionary to support. And so it's neat to be able to kind of connect that on an international level.
Listener, it's hard to express how difficult and logistically complicated this process can be. I spoke to Adam a little bit about it when we were together a few weeks ago. I just know from my personal standpoint, we support 9 different missionaries out of our church here in the Dominican, and many of them are in different countries. And one of the reasons we actually just go ahead and give the money annually is because it's so complicated to actually transfer funds sometimes, that just the sheer inconvenience of it. So I understand that this is something that is a great need, but requires much attention. And I know Adam has some help with other people, but he has spearheaded this. And our time is coming to an end. But why don't you tell us some of the countries that are part of this mission board right now, some of the missionaries that are being sent, where they're from and where they're going?
We have missionaries from Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua. Currently, we have church planners in those same countries, from Guatemala going to Guatemala, from Honduras to Honduras, from Nicaragua to Nicaragua, from El Salvador to Nicaragua, and one missionary from Honduras who has been in Africa is currently back on a medical leave. But the idea is wherever God's calling them, we want to help them get there and stay there.
Amen. And I think this is just the beginning of it. I know with some discussions with Adam and just other missionaries who have this kind of hope that some of these national pastors can really touch parts of the world that, North American missionaries it's been very difficult for them to get into. And
Yes.
for many cultural reasons, it will be something that can really make a great impact, not just in the near future, but for many generations to come. So
Yeah.
lastly here, let's ask you this. If someone is like in this church in Australia that contacts you, someone may be listening to the podcast today says, how can they get involved? How can they maybe give or pray or get in contact with you? What's the best way, not only specifically for you, Adam, but for this mission board?
Yeah. Well, the mission board, we have a mostly Spanish website. We're kind of updating it, but a little more in English. It's abilmissions.com, ABIL missions, or misiones, I guess.
Right.
Spanish, MISIONES.com. And we have literally, depending on the country you're coming from, a way to be able to support for those that want to go to those missionaries. And the cool thing about that, I don't have to worry about feeling embarrassed or anything. That's not for me.
Yeah.
I literally flew to a mission conference a few weeks ago to represent other missionaries in this thing. He said, "We want you to come, but not for you. We want you to come to represent others." Hey, I'll be there. That's an awesome thing. And there's definitely ways to be involved. And then there's some people who I think are probably preparing to go out. And they're like, hey, how do we do this whole deputation thing? Where do we start? Literally reach out. We want to help those from Latin America, which is a very fruitful field right now. We want to help them get into the rest of the world, wherever God's calling them to plant churches. We want to be a part of that.
Amen. I also want to encourage listeners to find Adam on Facebook. Adam, are you on any other social media platforms that people can keep abreast of your ministry and your family?
Yeah, Facebook, I guess, is the biggest one. That's Adam Esther Fridenstine. And then I'm on Twitter, which is, I don't put a lot on there, but that's my name, Adam Fridenstine. And then, we're on YouTube and stuff like that, live streaming for the church.
Amen.
We put out a lot more than I review. Some people say, hey, you didn't see that on Facebook? Yeah, I post stuff, but I don't really review my much. I'm kind of like that.
Well, it's exciting from afar, being your friend, but being someone who prays for your ministry, to see how the Lord's using you and Esther and your family. And we're excited about this new mission board. Please, listeners, get involved in some way. Maybe there is someone that would be interested in learning more about this. Pass it along. Adam, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. Are there any specific ways we can be praying for you and your ministry in the next couple of weeks?
Our prayer requests have been the same for years. We're praying for laborers. We're praying for wisdom. And part of wisdom is knowing how to balance the opportunities with the needs and the abilities to be able to complete all that. So those are our main prayer requests.
Amen. Well, those are great prayer requests. This is Eric Johnson from the Dominican Republic. Glad to be joined with my friend Adam today from El Salvador. Have a blessed day.